Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Bloom, the podcast. Hope you all are having a great day, and thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you guys are new here, I am your host, Donovan, and I am here with the one and only co-host, Ashley.
What's up?
And we're back for another episode, you guys. We're excited for this one. I hope you guys are all staying up to date with us on these episodes. We have some big announcements coming, actually starting with this episode. So just so that all the bloomers are aware, this is our semifinal? How would you say it? Semi-finale or quarter finale?
Second to last.
That's not dramatic enough. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
For the drama.
Yeah, y'all know what I'm talking about. It's the semi-final last episode of season 1 of Bloom the podcast. So if you guys are OG bloomers, you know we started the podcast a week from today. So today we're getting real close to our 1-year anniversary of the show. So on our 1 year, we're going to have a super special episode. Can't tell you guys exactly what it is, but we've got a really spicy one lined up. Super excited for it. It's going to be a really fun time, but we're going to be celebrating our 1-year anniversary, and then we're going to be taking a little bit of a hiatus for about 2 to 3 weeks before we start season 2 of Bloom the podcast, which is going to be amazing. I have lots of ideas, lots of stuff we're going to be doing, so I hope you guys all stay tuned with us. But just a little announcement there, so that way you guys are all on the same page with us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, so that way you guys can stay up to date, because we'll be posting a lot on there as well. Even when season 1 is over, you already know the content will not go away. I will be here posting stuff on my personal account and on the Bloom page, so make sure you guys are all following us there. But jumping straight into today's episode, we've got a fun one. If you guys missed last week's, we had a bloomer question that we answered, and that was how to be a Christian, how to have a relationship with the Lord. So super special episode for us. We really enjoyed filming that. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. If you guys missed it, I will link it in the description below, so you guys can go back and check it out and stay up to date with all our most recent episodes. But jumping right into it, we have the Blue Moment of the Week. And if you're new on this segment, we talk about how the Lord is growing us week by week, day by day, and how, what we're learning. So if you guys want to share what you guys have been learning in your day-to-day walk, definitely let us know in the comments or message us directly. I will start us off, and I will have to say humility has been a big one for me recently too. Last week, I kind of, when I was talking about forgiveness, this is one I think that couples very well with that. The Lord has put it on my heart to really have a proper view of myself and how I am to treat other people. I think we can all agree that pride is basically the root of almost every sin. And, I can say for myself, there has been plenty of times in my life where it's lots of pride, lots of self-righteousness, and I think the Lord has just been showing me through certain stuff I've been reading and people I've been talking to, just to really focus in on that as well with, the other things that I'm, trying to do. But having a heart of humility is what we're called to have as Christians. And I think it makes you stand out even that much more as a believer when you really project that humility into the world and operate with that mindset. I think that's super important.
Yeah, definitely. It's really good.
Yeah. What about you?
So I'd say for me, a big thing has been the importance of having a church body. And I was on the look for a church for a hot minute, so I know how awful that feeling is of being churchless. It's just not a good feeling. Yeah. But we finally found a church. We've gone there for like 2 months, over 2 months now. And I'm just like, it's just amazing the difference you have in your life when have a church family, and just like seeing just like how sweet and like caring they are. Like they're all helping us move and like all this stuff. It's just awesome. Like there's just, I don't know, it's just great having
So
a church
true.
family. Yeah, definitely missed that feeling of fellowship.
Yeah, I can second that 100%. Like when I found my church, it was just like shell shock of like, this is what I've been missing for all this time. Like,
Yep.
it's crazy.
You were
Like,
lacking, man.
yeah. So the Lord is gracious and He provides that when you need it, and
It's like
that's
funny
awesome.
how like no church, like every church, you're like, I don't know, like nah, until you find the one that like God
It's
is
like dating.
specifically. Yeah, it's like that you guys were meant for me this entire time.
It's your soulmate church.
Yep, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, there you guys have it. That is the Bloom moment of the week. Like I said, feel free to let us know how you guys have been growing and what the Lord is doing in your guys' lives. We'd love to hear about it.
Yep.
Jumping straight into the topic for today, we have a fun one. We're going to talk about some of the things we've gone through while making Christian content on social media and on just media platforms in general. There's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of difficulties that can come with it, and there's a lot of things that you have to do with your heart when it comes to posting Christian content. So we're gonna jump straight into it, and I guess I'll pass it over to you. When you first decided that you wanted to do like what you're doing with your Instagram, what pulled you to that, and how did you kind of get started with that? Because it's not necessarily for everybody, that's for sure. It takes a lot of dedication, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. And most people, it's social media is a very brain numbing thing. So to take social media and kind of flip it on its head and try and do what you're doing with it, what was kind of that push for you, and how did you get started with that?
So for me, I had known I always wanted to do social media in some way. I just didn't know what way I wanted to do it. So I started off by making like a ton of not blogs, sorry. I started off by making a whole bunch of IGTVs, which were just like vlogging videos of me doing fun stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was never like completely sold on it. Like I was like, yeah, this is great, but I'm not like, oh, like I love this, like I'm passionate about it. But it kind of all started with, I don't know, I kind of started writing tiny blogs about little things like, oh, like let's get motivated. It's Monday, writing like little things. But then I had a story that I had wanted to share about Nikki and I's experience in getting married. And I didn't share it for a really long time out of fear of like people on Instagram judging or, just people having a negative reaction to it.
Right.
But finally, after enough of my friends were like, you need to talk about this, I was like, man, like I feel like I'm finally at a place where I'm not bitter or angry, but I'm like ready to speak on this subject. So my first like real blog post was about Nikki and I's story, and it was crazy. Like it got so many like people out of nowhere were commenting, and it was like insane how many people had the same experience that I did. And they were just like sharing their stories with me and like sharing the posts and like messaging me, and I was just like, wow, like I think like this is what I want to share. Like I had been through all these experiences during dating, and like I felt like I was constantly talking about relationships and the struggles and all this stuff with my friends or people around me.
Right.
And I felt like I had advice to give. And so putting this out and seeing people like actually be like, oh, they like want to hear these things. I was like, wow, like this is probably what I should actually be doing, is like sharing my experiences and my thoughts and like what I think on these subjects with these people,
Yeah.
And like after I put that first one out, the next couple ones just kind of flowed, and like I actually realized that like I wasn't half bad at writing. Like I never thought of myself as like a writer.
Yeah.
So it was like kind of like weird for me to be like, oh, I could actually write blogs. I'm not bad at it. So it was kind of like all that stuff coming together for me that got me started on it.
Definitely. That's great. And I think that's just how the Lord works. And that's, you said a very important thing about your first post that I think is one of the major keys for being a Christian and making Christian content, especially if you're going to be talking about important topics. And that is when you said you weren't bitter and you weren't angry and you were ready to talk about it. Mm-hmm. I myself have felt that same way. And obviously there's plenty of things in my personal life that I maybe haven't shared in detail. Mm-hmm. But I think large part of that is because there are certain things that it's like, maybe I'm not ready to talk about that. You know what I mean? Because like each situation is different and comes with its own, you know, circumstances, and people have to, you know, be responsible with that, right, as far as like sharing that. So not everything is meant to be posted out there, but I think that's an important thing, especially like I said, if you're going to be talking about important things. If you come onto social media with that negative aura that almost everybody else has that's posting stuff, you kind of just slide right in, and your message kind of gets washed over with the anger and resentment that you're speaking with. So that's super important.
Definitely.
I would say for myself, though, I had the idea for the podcast, but I had a lot of internal dilemmas that I had to kind of go through as far as like how I wanted it to be. And I think the Lord really just put it on my heart to speak on things that I felt like were not talked about a lot and open up conversations, because I feel like I used to be the type of person that didn't want to grow that much. Like I was very content with just staying where I was at, knowing what I know, and kind of just living life. But as I've gotten older, I've really grown to appreciate how much I don't understand things. Mm-hmm. And I love listening to other people conversate that know more than me. And I love talking to people that know more than me. And that's kind of what pushed me to do this more, is because I wanted to create a space where you can talk about these important topics without feeling like you're going to be judged or you're going to be criticized, because we're trying to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think the only real way to grow is by having conversations and to have these talks about things that maybe everyone doesn't agree on, and maybe everyone has a slightly different view, or where they grew up, they do it this way or do it that way. And even with biblical things, because I mean, the more you talk to people in the church, the more you see how differently people even interpret the scriptures. And not all of it's bad. People just interpret the scriptures differently. Now, obviously, there are some times where it is unbiblical and you have to like address it that way. But more often than not, people's experiences shape the way that they interpret things. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the big push for me to like really want to do this and get curious and get involved with people and talk with people just about whatever they're passionate about. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the most important thing for me, is just talking with people and understanding where they're coming from and understanding why people believe what they believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what for you would you say were some of the struggles with starting out? Because not everything, like for you, your first post did really, really well, but most people really fear that first episode or that first post, because they're afraid that maybe it won't be received well, or it's not going to do as well as they want it, or they're going to say something dumb, or they're going to, you know, like, what was it for you that was like maybe holding you back or like making it difficult from a mental standpoint, and also from like a spiritual standpoint of like, how do I educate people with the word? Like, what were those struggles like for you?
Well, I think for the first post, it was just offending people. You know, because there were people who, you know, were involved in situations, and it's not like they weren't going to see the post, you know, like I just kind of come from like a rough church situation, and all those people followed me. So it was like putting myself out there. I knew that, you know, it was like, okay, I'm speaking out about what I felt happened to me, and these people are gonna have to be okay with like me speaking about it, you know? And that was like kind of scary. But I think for me, I just kind of had to realize like I might lose some of that audience, you know? And that's okay. Like those people might not like what I have to say, but like this is my story, and like I can't stay silent about my story because that's a huge part of my life, how I got married. Like we can't hide that. Like what would that be? So I think it was just like realizing like that if I want to do this, I have to be open with my followers, even if that means losing some of them because I'm open with them, you know?
Yeah.
And I think another thing would just be like starting out, it's just, how do I feel like it's just, you're going to get negative feedback.
Yeah.
No matter how well you think you phrase something. And that's kind of just like how it goes. So I know after my first one, my second one and my third one definitely got like some controversy in the comments.
Did you get controversy on the first one?
I did not. Well, okay. I got a couple comments from people who were involved in this situation.
Oh, okay.
So I expected that much. I was like, okay. But people who weren't involved were just like, wow, like this is crazy, you know? Yeah. Like really understanding. So for the next second or third one, there was some controversy, and like starting out, it's like, excuse me, like you disagree, like, you know, like because you're just not used to having to argue with someone on Instagram, and it shouldn't be arguing. But the way I kind of like, now that I've had the experience, it's not like an argument, you know, it's just like, okay, they believe something different, and like that's totally okay, and here's how we can have a civil conversation about why we disagree. And that's honestly what it's all about, like you said, is like starting those conversations, like, okay, like why do we think this way? Let's talk about it, you know? So not just like putting it out there and being like, this is what I have to say and all of you guys need to love what I say. But like putting it out there and being like, all right, let's talk about it now that you know my thoughts. And that has been way more comforting, like, you know, but starting out, it's always scary when someone rebuttals you in your comments and you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And that's a weird space for Christians too, because you wouldn't necessarily think it would be the same way. At least I didn't think it would be the same way.
Yeah.
But it is. Like, you know, and that's kind of just how people are in general. Like if they see something they don't agree with, and social media gives everybody a voice to say anything. So just as much as we're sitting here saying something, you know, anyone else can get on or into the comments or whatever and kind of, you know, say their piece.
Right. And
like that was one of the struggles for me too, because like, not that I'm not a confrontational person, but I don't do well with comments. It like going back and forth in the comments. Yeah. Like if you want to talk,
it can be really exasperating.
Yeah. Like if you want to talk to me about something I said, either text me personally, call me, or sit right here. Right. You know, like, and that's what I think is what's best, because it's really easy to misinterpret people and kind of get the wrong ideas of what people are saying without having either those face-to-face or, you know, more engaging private conversation. Because social media just can get spun out of whack so quickly, and it goes from 0 to 60 like nothing else. Like it's crazy. So that was one of the things for me, and luckily the response for most of our episodes is like really positive. Most of the people have really awesome things to say. Love you guys for that. So we haven't really had too much of like back and forth in the comments, right? Which I'm thankful for.
Lucky.
So yeah, for you, how do you keep that in a civil manner? Because even though we're believers, we still, you know, have to be respectful, and you know, we have to get
upset.
Yeah. Right. So how do you manage that?
Well, at first, it kind of started off like when people would do that, I felt very upset about it just because I felt like it was distracting from my main message, because they're in the comments saying stuff I never said and arguing about it. I'm like, what are you talking? Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, like if someone new finds this post, they're going to be confused because the people in the comments are like confusing everybody, you know, like that was like my thought process. And then I realized like that's like not the case. Like if they're following me for what I say, the people in the comments can do whatever the heck they want, you know, like they're either going to agree with the post or they don't. But I think just replying to like comments, I just kind of like, I always read what my response is to them to Nikki or my mom, because I know that I can tend to sound harsh sometimes, or it's a little like I'm a little upset at the comment, maybe because like I feel like they're really like misunderstanding me, or they're putting words in my mouth, like I'm only human, like that is upsetting sometimes. So I think it's really great to kind of run by people like what you're gonna say and be like, how does this sound? Because they're sometimes they're like, wow, you sound really upset, or other times they're like, oh, like this is good, so I think that's been like my main source of like knowing if I'm doing well responding to people or not, and also just like checking my own heart, like if I'm replying in anger or if I'm like genuinely like, okay, like this is just their thoughts, like we're gonna reply calmly, so
that's huge. And I think anytime I've had any kind of conversations with people about content that I posted, especially related to the podcast, the thing that kind of keeps me in check, it's like, okay, so we have a disagreement or a different stance on something. Show me Bible. Because a lot of people like to talk about their feelings and about their opinions and about what they think is true. And I'll be completely honest, I do the same thing. I mean, this is our podcast. We're speaking about our perspective on life. Perception is everything. But I do my very, very best to make sure everything that we're saying here on the show is coming from a place of Bible. So when anytime someone disagrees with me, take me to scripture, and vice versa. I want to be able to take people to scripture if I see something that I feel like maybe isn't correct, or if I disagree with it. I think that's for Christians, there's not as much room for like, well, your opinion's your opinion. Like it's not necessarily always like that. No, obviously there are conscious issues that do vary if it's not necessarily a gospel or biblical sin issue. But there is a lot less room for wiggling around gospel and biblical truths, in my opinion. And I think that's why these types of platforms are so useful, because if you're really sharing what the Bible has to say, there's a lot less room for people to kind of come in there and be destructive, like you were saying.
The sad part is that so many believers have such a different interpretation of what the scriptures mean. That has caused an even bigger problem, because it's like you're arguing with the same scripture, but they're like, well, this is what that means. And you're like, no, and that gets tricky.
Yeah, that's it. And that's one of the things I was actually going to bring up a little bit later on, but you brought it up now, so I'll just hit it. That was one of the big pressures for me, because I was like, I'm making a Christian podcast, and the immense pressure I felt like in my first couple of episodes, like I better be saying what's true. Like I felt like so much pressure to be like making sure what I'm saying is biblical. And that takes a toll if you're, if you're not careful, because you really have to be diligent in reading your word and actually living what you talk about, because
someone sees you outside, they're like, hey.
It's a slippery slope once you start kind of getting off that trail.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. And that's like, that's why it's such a good thing to like, such a good industry to be in though, is because it keeps you really accountable. You're like, shoot, I better really be living this right now. Or
and the other thing that's hard too is seeing other people in your sphere that are professing believers but posting things that are like your content, but just like the Twilight Zone version. You know what I mean? Like I see some posts out there, and like, cause I do a lot of marketing for the podcast. So like I'll go on to Instagram and I'll search Christian podcasts or Christian content and stuff like that to try and create conversation, engage with other users. And some of the stuff I see from other podcasts, and to be fair, I see tons of amazing stuff out there that people are doing great work, and the Lord is using all these accounts, which is really awesome to see. But then you come across those one or two accounts where it's like, what is going on here?
And they're associating with you.
And it feels like you're watching, like you're in the upside down. Like it's crazy.
No, I definitely agree. I feel like when I first started out, this is kind of a whole long thing, but like when I first started out, there were so many people, and I was just like looking at all their accounts, and I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. Like I need to do what they're doing. I need to do what they're doing. But as I've like grown on my own, and like kind of like, now I have like my own strong opinions and thoughts. Like now I see some of these pages out there, And it's like giving me a whole new motivation of like why I do my blog post, because I'm like,
right.
whoa, they're like talking about the same thing I am, but this is like so off, you know? And like,
Yeah.
I'm like, even more so, I need to talk about this then, because, you know, all these young girls are saying this and they think this is correct.
Right.
But it's not. And so like, I'm like, okay, new motivation for why I need to get out there and speak. But also like, it's just like helped shape my thinking and like looking at these accounts and saying what I don't want to do. Because some of these accounts, like, they're like, it's not like they're not believers, right? But they're posting some things that I'm just like, wow, like, that's not loving, or like, this isn't this, you know? And it like, it helps me see exactly what I don't want to do. It helps me be more like watchful of myself. Like, is that how I come off? Like, is that what I'm saying? Because like, we don't want to say stuff that way, you know? And so I think that's been like really good in general. Like, even if it's like good to have those people you don't agree with, because it kind of just like shows you, you know, you're like, oh, like,
yeah,
okay, so I need to not do that or come off this way, or, you know.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is with the accounts that you maybe don't agree with, that's one of the beauties of social media, is maybe reaching out to each account and really dialoguing with those people and having those conversations where you can kind of discuss those things and be ministering to people at the same time, because maybe they're completely unaware of the way that they come off, or, you know, maybe something they maybe fully don't understand. And the Lord always, and like, that's one of the things I was going to bring up too, is the pride aspect. Because once you start to have a little bit of like success with whatever you're doing, or, you know, you start getting more followers or people are listening, like, it's very easy to start getting very careless and flippant with how you approach it. And I've just been humbled recently with seeing all the comments on, or just people saying stuff about the podcast to me, and I'm just realizing like the Lord is working in, and there's like, it's not what I'm doing. And I'm praying to the Lord that he keeps that mentality in me, because it's been so fruitful to just have the Lord working. And obviously the Lord gives us the words to say that he's going to use. So, you know, not getting prideful, especially when we see other accounts that maybe we don't agree with. And it's very easy to just put the hammer down and be like, oh, well, this person, they should delete their account, stop doing what they're doing. Like, you know, it's coming alongside and trying to help people grow, and like I said, having those conversations. So that's a hard battle to fight.
And I think as like bloggers, it's really dangerous to like be prideful, because then you end up like, most people's intent with starting a blog is to like encourage and share like what they're learning, you know, and like encourage young girls or whatever their little niche may be, you know. But I feel like when you end up like, when you get pride because you're successful, then you end up preaching at people. Like, you're not helping them learn or like encouraging them, but you're telling them what to do. You're like, if you're not doing this, then you're out, you know. And like, that's a really dangerous place to be in, because like, as bloggers, these people are like coming to like learn from you. And so it can get really dangerous when you're telling people how they need to live their life, instead of like encouraging people of like, hey, this is like how I live my life and why, you know what I'm saying? And as I get deeper and deeper into like the blogging realm, that's like what I see. I'm like, wow, like this really is like a slippery slope where you can really end up like telling people like what to do instead of like encouraging them on what to do.
That's an interesting point. And we could do a whole separate episode about this, because there is a overwhelming presence in people's lives that social media has, that you can, like you were saying, you can infiltrate how people believe and how people see, you know, certain topics and whatnot. And that is a good thing. And it also can be a really, really negative thing if you're not careful. And kind of walking that line, because obviously each person is responsible to be a Berean and compare things to the scriptures, and to, you know, do their due diligence to make sure what they're seeing and what they're intaking is biblical. But it's very easy to talk Christianese and kind of be preaching things that are not biblical, and people can take that and run with it, and that's definitely not where you want to be.
Yeah, it's like not from the Bible. It's just their opinion, but it's like, this is biblical. It's like, but How?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And because it can almost become one of these things where you talk about something, but you don't give the biblical resolve. And that's one thing I see a lot is people that post problems. So say I see this issue with the church or with Christians or with this topic or with this group, but they don't give the remedy. And that's one thing that I definitely don't agree with, because with the platform that you have, it's so easy to talk about the problems. I mean, I think our generation is so talented at talking about problems. Like, it's our number one thing is to bring up problems, whether they do or don't exist.
Right. It's a want to be controversial.
Yeah.
And that is not a good, I've learned this recently. It's not a good thing to come with, because for a lot of people who start blogging and stuff, the main way to get a following is to be controversial.
Clickbait.
And so literally these Christian bloggers have kind of lost their motivation for why they're doing it. And they're just like, controversy will bring me more followers.
Yeah. It starts looking like a CNN headline.
Exactly. And like, when I first started out, I was looking at ways to gain a following, blah, 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 all this stuff. And like, one of the biggest ones was controversial stuff. And just like, you know, like, I was like so focused on like, okay, so then like, what can I write then? You know, and then I realized, like, I was like, no,
yeah,
this is not this. Like, you need to write about like what God's putting on your heart to share with people, not what's going to get you followers, you know, like it's not about that. And at that point, you're just kind of making more enemies, because you're not like, you're having people follow you because they dislike you, not even because they like what you're saying. It's just like, they're so caught up in how annoying you are that they want to follow you.
And that's what I mean, because anytime you approach it, because even if you want to post something controversial, which I don't necessarily think is a problem, it's all about how you go about it.
And your intent for doing it.
Right, because if you're just trying to throw out salt into a wound by posting a problem, like I was saying before, but not giving the remedy, because you can post something that's super controversial, but if you bring the biblical backing into how to fix that issue, it no longer, it diffuses the controversy aspect of the post.
It's not really controversial.
Right. It's like, this is a biblical truth. We're sinners who fail at this, and this is what we can do to make ourselves better and steer ourselves more towards Christ, instead of just like, here's a problem, now that's it.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
And because there's also another layer of it too, because like one of the things that I always think about when I'm thinking of topics to talk about on the podcast, I do tend to think of what is a problem that I see. But the flip side of that is, how have I seen that in my own life, and how have I seen the Lord address it, and how have I seen it addressed biblically? You know, because you want to be able to educate people on issues that are in the world. You know, you don't want to just be preaching to the choir 24/7.
Right.
You know, you want to be able to shed some light on things that are maybe, like I said, lesser talked about or misunderstood or misinterpreted. But you don't want to just leave it at, oh, you're misinterpreting this. You want to bring in the actual education aspect of it.
Right. And if you're trying to reach people who also aren't saved, don't be like, you're going to hell and that's literally it. Like, that's the kind of what it feels like, you know? Like, I'm like, why? How is anybody going to want to listen to you when you're talking like that? Yeah. Like, they're just going to feel like you're attacking them.
Yeah, it stops becoming a dialogue and it becomes a monologue of you just preaching at people, and it becomes very self-righteous and very hard to listen to.
Right, right. So I think it all just, like, kind of brings us full circle of, like, your heart motive for, like, wanting to, like, share these things and like do these things is like so important. Like, I talked to someone recently because I was all over the place about, like I said, how to build my account and stuff, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with building your account. Yeah. But I was just like, how many like blogs should I post a week? Like, do people want to see what I'm doing? Like, blah, 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 blah. And I'd asked all these different people's opinions, and they all kind of said different things. Like, I mean, you could post like once or twice, like random stuff like that. Yeah. But then I finally talked to one girl who was also doing blogs, and she was like, you should literally post blogs whenever the heck you think of something that you want people to know about. Like, whenever you want to share something, post the blog. Like, that's all that matters. And only if you get one like, and it's one person in the comments saying like, oh, like, this helped me or anything, then that's all that matters. And like, that changed my whole experience. Like, now I'm like, I don't care. Like, and I can see like the difference. Like I'm writing and like
Is that me you talked to?
Huh?
I said, was that me you talked to? I could have sworn I said that.
Okay, maybe it was 2 people.
Wait a minute.
But now I can just see the difference. Like people will come in my comments and just be like, if it's only just like 1 or 2 people, they're like, oh, that made a difference. And I'm like, oh, my job is done. Like,
yeah,
it's all good. And like that just like, I don't know, it just changes the whole game for you. Like you start writing more passionately when you have that purpose.
Yeah. And that was one of the things for me as well. Because I wasn't necessarily sure what my, like how the Lord was going to use me or like what my gifts were per se. I've had a lot of like doubts about that. But I knew this was something that I wanted to do. And I knew that it was something that I enjoy, that I could be good at. And I've just seen the Lord bless that. And like you said, it's that purpose that kind of distracts you from gaining that prideful head when you can see the Lord's work, no matter if it's one person listening and just really appreciating you for sharing your heart, or if it's 0 people, or if it's 1,000, it doesn't matter when you're doing it unto the Lord. And that's really the most important thing. With Christian content, because as Christians, and I think this is kind of where, like you said, it comes full circle. No matter what you're doing it to honor the Lord. And, that's what you need to keep the focus on.
Right. And like, it's like evangelism. Like, look at what the blog page and this podcast do. It like gets people coming and asking like, how do you become a Christian? Because you're opening yourself up to those opportunities to talk to those people. And that is what keeps us people who do this stuff going. Like getting those comments that are like, yo, like help me with this. Or like, like it really is a ministry opportunity on social media or whatever platform you're doing.
Absolutely.
So,
and to kind of close out, what advice would you give to someone who's been contemplating starting making Christian content, whether that's sharing their life, doing blogs, doing a podcast, making a show, whatever it may be? What advice would you give to that person?
100%. Go for it. And I think that you'll just grow as a person doing something like this. Like, it just kind of changes you a little bit. It makes you think more about things. It makes you study more on these topics. It like, man, it just gives you so much opportunity. And I don't know, it just really grows your relationship with God too, and like holds you responsible, like I said, Yeah. So I would 100% say go for it. And don't think like you're not bringing anything to the table, because every believer has something different to say, to bring to the table.
You stole my line. That's exactly what I was going to say. No matter who you are, what you've experienced, someone can learn from you. Someone can gain knowledge from you. You can bless someone. Yep. No matter if you're a scholar of the Bible or whether you only know a little bit, like there's just, the Lord can use you in any way if you really are doing that for him.
Right. You don't have to fully arrive, because none of us are, to like make a post or do a podcast. Like that's not how that is. Like we're all learning together, but it's like, if you're learning something, why not share that with everybody?
Blue moment of the week.
Yep.
That's what it's for.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and I would also say just to be transparent, as believers, there is such a refreshing aspect to see other believers that are okay with putting their walk with the Lord out there, into the sphere of social media. Yeah. It's just encouraging to see like the realness of someone struggling or someone's doing well, whatever it may be. It's just powerful. And the Lord uses that transparency to bring people closer together, to bring him into people's lives. Like it's a blessing all around. So that would be my big thing, is be transparent with your content and be transparent with who you are as a person. Be you all the time. And I don't say that in like a be yourself and everyone will love you for like, that's not what this is. I'm saying to make good Christian content, in my opinion, you have to be transparent with your own walk. You have to bring
your own thing to the table.
Yeah.
Like that's something I really had to learn, was like, you see all these bloggers and you want to be just like them. You're like, oh, I should share content just like that. And it's like, no, share the content that like relates to you.
Yeah, your life, your story. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But on that note, I hope you guys are or have enjoyed this podcast episode. If you guys are thinking about starting something of your own, you already know what we would say, to go for it and make it happen. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this. Make sure you guys leave a like, a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. We've got, like I said, some big things coming. So yeah, make sure you guys stay tuned for weekly episodes, and we will see you all on the next episode.